Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first core webinar of 2021. I'm Marketing Communications Manager Daniel Sloan, and we're excited to be bringing you today's Culture of Research and Education webinar titled Strategies for Social Emotional Learning When Children Are Learning at Home. The core webinar series is designed to provide faculty, students, and alumni an opportunity to share their research and scholarship with the Trident community. By fostering a culture of professional development and idea exchange, participants will have access to a valuable forum for lifelong learning. This university-wide effort is coordinated by Trident's doctoral studies directors. Just a few notes before we begin today's session. You're welcome to ask questions at any time. You can do that by going to the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen, going about halfway down, and finding the question box. Just type your questions or comments in there. We'll get to them and respond to you, and then follow up during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation this evening. And all participants are muted. Just keep that in mind. And if you need to get a hold of us, do not use the raise hand function. We can't communicate with you that way. This webinar will be recorded, and all attendees will receive a link to the webinar and a copy of the slides early next week. So let me introduce today's two presenters for you. First, we have Dr. Heidi Schmidt, who is Department Chair in College of Education. One second. Computer's freezing up already. The majority of Dr. Schmidt's career is spent in K-12 education as a teacher, principal, and district administrator. In addition, she has a decade of university teaching at the master's and doctoral levels. Currently at Trident, she facilitates master's level courses in the education program at Trident. She's licensed as a district administrator, superintendent, director of instruction, principal, and teacher in the state of Wisconsin. She follows a servant leadership model and believes in giving back to her students and staff. Next, we have Dr. Nicole Frederick, who is joining us as well. An experienced educator, Dr. Frederick brings over 20 years of administration and teaching experience to Trident. She holds a national board certification for middle child generalist from the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards Board. Her research interests include teacher preparation, teaching excellence, and educational leadership. And so our presenters, and I'm going to hand things off to, I believe it's you, Dr. Schmidt, who's going to be kicking things off tonight.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our session. Dr. Frederick and I are happy to be presenting tonight. We have 4 learning objectives that we want to share with you for our webinar tonight. And just as an intro, since the pandemic and these restrictions started more than a year ago, many of you have experienced working with your children at home. You yourself may be working from home. And our goal for today is to provide you some information about your child and social emotional learning, that learning via screen, some strategies to help you as parents while your children learn at home, some self-strategies for yourself as their parent caregiver, and then some thoughts and when your children are going back to their brick and mortar school. So we have 4 learning objectives that are going to guide our session today. We're going to define social emotional learning and its impact that your children may experience at home. We're going to talk about some strategies to address their social and emotional needs when they learn at home. Again, to provide you as a parent some self-care strategies. And then the 4th objective, again, is to offer you some thoughts about when your children are going back to school and some of that re-entry criteria. Oh, next slide, sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Schmidt, for introducing us to our session objectives. And I know that we're both excited to be here sharing some great strategies with the parents for at-home learning and social emotional learning. So with that being said, I'd like to start a little bit with the why behind the what. I tend to find that understanding the why helps me to have a greater and deeper understanding of the what. And so as we dig into these SEL practices and strategies for parents, I'd like to share why this discussion is important. So when you look here on the screen, you'll see that Daniel Goleman has the emotional intelligence theory, and it is encompassed by 5 components here that you'll see: self-awareness, self-regulation, internal motivation, empathy, and social skills. So talking a little bit about each of those, self-awareness is when your child has the ability to understand their own emotions, their thoughts, their values, and how their behaviors influence other people and across different contexts. Self-regulation is really their ability to manage and monitor their own emotions and their feelings and their thoughts in an acceptable way. Their internal motivation has to do with that internal drive, those internal rewards that give them naturally satisfying feelings. Empathy is their ability to put themselves in somebody else's shoes and to be able to understand other people's feelings and emotions. And then the social skills have to do with developing and maintaining positive relationships, making connections, communicating, collaborating, and those sorts of things. Daniel Goleman talks often about how that sometimes that the emotional intelligence shows even greater success than academic or IQ. So I think it's really important that as we understand emotional intelligence in children, that you see social emotional learning is actually the strategies and the skills that help to greater develop their emotional intelligence. So those are how those things are tied. So the reason we talk about social emotional learning is so that we understand as parents and teachers that as we develop and provide opportunities to model and practice social emotional learning, we are developing and growing their emotional intelligence. Next slide. So this is just a quick matrix that I like looking at. It shows really the context of social emotional learning. And if you look right inside the core of that matrix, you'll see the 5 components of social emotional learning. And you'll see that several of them overlap with the components of emotional intelligence. So you can see that we're looking at developing their self-awareness, their self-management skills, their social awareness, their relationship skills, responsible decision-making. So those are the skills that we're looking to develop when we teach social emotional skills to our children. And if you'll notice in the matrix, you'll see that this happens in the classroom, it happens in school, it happens within homes, families, caregivers, and out in the community. But because we're kind of in this, we're in the pandemic, learning looks different. Many kids are not even attending school in the school building. The responsibility comes back to whoever's in the home with them as they're learning at home. It's important to create intentional opportunities to practice these skills among the family because they're not in their actual classroom environment. Next slide. So why, go ahead, sorry.
This year has looked different as parents have taken on the role as teacher at home. While managing and engaging students at school is so different, students are in a classroom, they're in a building, they're learning communication strategies, developing those relationships, as Nicole said. They're watching and modeling their peers along with their teachers. There's just a daily interaction that's a natural process when they're in their brick and mortar school. And that is so different when they're learning at home. There's a difference with cooperative learning groups or just even participating in discussions. Everything looks a bit different. So why is social emotional learning important for you as a parent? We want our students to learn the subject matter. We want our students to grow as they're in their academic area, but also we want to continue to understand how they're feeling. You think about your child, you want them to feel competent and confident and safe online. The conversations that you have with them, just asking them, how have you adjusted to that video format over the last 10 months? How do you feel connected with your teacher? How do you feel connected with your friends or your peer group, or not feel connected? There's so many students that are missing their after school activities. That's dance, it could be sports, it's just their after school clubs. All of those interactions would be part of a normal school routine have been interrupted this last year as we pivoted to online learning. So your child is probably has or is experiencing some changes. One of the pieces in Nicole's slides talked about self-regulation, and that's what we want our children to be able to do. They need to recognize their own feelings, their emotions, and their behaviors. Do they know when they're feeling different? Do they know when they need to take a breath? Do they know when they need to stand up? Do they know when they just need to ask for help? All those pieces go into a child learning to self-regulate when they're looking at a screen. So much easier when we're in the classroom and we're with our same age peers and have a teacher to guide us. Most important thing is you as a parent to help guide your children to what that self-regulation looks like, because it looks different for each child. You want to talk with your child about anxiety or any other types of behavioral problems. What are they anxious about when they're learning online? What are they worried about? Why aren't they doing their work? Is it because they can't sit in front of that screen for more than 20 minutes at a time? Do they need to stand? Do they need their fidget device? How can you help them reconnect with their friends? Or what does that outside play date look like that's different? Or how do you travel outside your bubble and feel safe? All those conversations can help maybe lessen that angst or that anxiety that your child might be feeling. Let's also think about some other triggers, things in your child's life that maybe we can control. What about their diet? What about the food? What about the processed food or the snack food as opposed to fruit or vegetable or just hydrating with water? The importance of sleep. Research has shown how important it is to get off those screens before going to bed so that they do get a good night's sleep. And also getting up and moving, taking those brain breaks. Is it walking around the house outside? Is it just taking that 5 minutes to recharge themselves in whatever way is best for them. All of those add to lessening that stress level and maybe that anxiety to your child. And also think importance of communication. I believe we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We're to listen more than probably to use our mouth. Sometimes we just have to talk it back to our child and just say, I'm hearing you say, or what can we do about this? Do you have a plan? What's your plan for this? And remember, as parents, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to ask that teacher or someone at the school. You may be connected with a medical provider or a mental health counselor. All of those people, it does take the village. All of those people are important while your child is learning at home. It's okay to gain others' perspectives because we're all continuing to learn. Next slide.
So one of the most important reasons for eliciting emotion is it does help us connect with our children during these very unprecedented times when things are changing in a moment's notice. And we know that children, they thrive with consistency. And we know that the last several months, there has been a lot of inconsistent things that have been happening. And so I think one thing, Dan, is it echoing? Okay, that's better. So why we want to look at emotions in the home during at-home learning is because eliciting emotions in positive ways actually has benefits for academic learning. So I know as a parent myself that sometimes, I'm concerned about the level of instruction and are they getting it? Do they understand? Are they going to remember this when they get back into the classroom? Are they really making the academic growth and progress that they need to be making to stay on track? And so one thing, with the eliciting of positive emotions is that it has these benefits that you see here on the screen. It has improved cognition. What is cognition? That is the act of thinking about thinking. And so it's acquiring knowledge, understanding through thought, experiences, our senses. And we know that when we improve cognition, that the positive outcomes may include higher test scores, greater levels of academic achievement, broader areas of thinking. Sometimes there are paradigm shifts that happen. They have greater perspectives. They're able to have higher levels of problem solving. They do greater things with their creative thinking. And so improving cognition is one thing that happens when we can elicit the emotions that Heidi was talking about when we're communicating with them and we're finding out how they're feeling, why are they feeling the way that they're feeling, and really having those intentional conversations. Eliciting emotions actually strengthens memory as well, because we know that our brain is designed to remember anything associated with emotion. So interesting enough, we can have long-term memory without short-term memory, but in order for things to move into the long-term memory, it needs to be associated or perceived as important, as relevant. And so it's really fascinating when you think about emotions in learning, because whether it's even a strong negative, a strong positive emotion, but if they're feeling some kind of emotion, we know that there's a greater chance that that's going to be retained into their long-term memory, which helps with their recall and retention of concepts being learned in school. We do see an increase in motivation as a result of eliciting emotions. Emotions help our students cope with frustration. They manage and they learn how to tend to their emotions. They find levels of grit and resilience that they didn't know that they had. It enhances their drive and their desire to learn when they can dig deep and find that internal motivation within themselves. And then it also creates relevance and meaning for the learning context. When students can make connections between the content that they're learning and the real world application, it makes them more relevant. It makes it more relevant and more meaningful. And I think sometimes in the at-home learning, when maybe they're just in the Google Classroom or they just have an assignment to do, as a parent, when we can step in and help them make those connections and see the relevancy to real life application, they're able to continue to kind of push forward, even if it might be a little bit more difficult or, something that they're struggling with. So I love the idea that we establish relevance and meaning in everything that we do. I think about it this way: if we teach someone how to add 2 + 2, but they don't really understand the context or the algorithm behind it, it's really not cognitively meaningful. But if I've read a book and it's about a beloved pet, and I ask, my students to write about, a beloved animal or a favorite animal in a movie, usually there's a little bit more meaning to that. They find more relevance to that. And then they're usually able to recall and connect these ideas much longer after they have finished the activity. Next slide. So during these times, it's important to pay attention to our children's emotions, recognizing why they're showing specific emotions, what we can do to support them regardless of the emotion that they're feeling, and really being intentional with these opportunities is a great way that we as parents can practice social emotional learning at home. So I had read this article that talked about stress, childhood trauma, and it was very interesting in regards to stress and brain development. And we know that as the brain develops, that neural pathways are created. These connections are shaped over time by experience. And so we know that stress releases cortisol, and too much of that can impact their moods, their behaviors. We see disruptions in memory and recall. And so if at-home learning is difficult for your student, they might, as Heidi said, they might be lacking the drive. They might be falling behind on assignments, missing the social interactions with their teachers and their friends. They're probably experiencing some stress related to school. And so that we know that it's important to recognize these. And as a mom of 5 kids who are doing at-home learning, we have moments where in an hour we can see the whole array of emotions from negative to positive. And we've had to manage that by really recognizing, what is the emotion that I'm feeling? Is it negative? Is it positive? Why am I feeling this way? Talking through that, and then really looking at a counter emotion, especially if it's negative. So we talk a lot about, I know you're feeling this way, but is there a way that we can move, to a more positive emotion? I know you might be upset about this, but can you see the benefits of this? And so we're really having to have a lot of those conversations, and I'm having to use those as opportunities to talk through and help my kids learn how to self-regulate, which is difficult in the bubble of our home. And so some days are tough, but what we do know and what we are fortunate to know is that research has repeatedly shown the effects of social emotional learning interventions and practice. And so being able to help our students, our children, cope with stress, manage their anger, avoid these distractions, and really find the inner motivation to be successful in a space that is so new. And so next slide. I love this list of positive emotions because I think that I have found that my children sometimes feel like they can only be happy when they're feeling happiness. And so recognizing that there are a multitude of positive emotions that we can feel even when we may not feel happy, it's very easy for us to fall into, those negative emotions. And so we actually keep this list right on our whiteboard next to the fridge because I am trying to point out moments of time and opportunities when they can or are showing gratitude or curiosity or optimism, so that they're starting to recognize what a positive emotion looks like. And so that when I, feel, this happened just the other day, sitting at the computer, at the table, very frustrated with one of their assignments. In the meantime, their sister was bringing their laundry up and putting it on their bed. And I said, you know what? I know right now you're really tired and you're feeling frustrated, but you can also feel gratitude that your sister brought your laundry up and put it on your bed. And so really helping them to counteract some of those negative feelings that come during this time when they are lacking interaction with their teachers, lacking interactions with their friends, and really just experiencing some difficult things with their learning at home. So I'd encourage you to take a look at this list. Think about times that you can point out these positive emotions to your children. I use this a lot to discuss, even in our house, the why behind the what. Why are you feeling this way? What can we do different? And then I encourage them to think, of the positive emotion and really be able to recognize that. There's such intentionality that comes along with eliciting positive emotions in order to actually impact your child's social and emotional well-being related to their emotional intelligence and ultimately their academic success. Next slide. So we recognize that our children feel negative emotions. We're talking to them, we're identifying what those are, and we are encouraging and helping them to see how the positive emotions will be more beneficial to them. So focusing on positive emotions that we just discussed within those several examples do have a positive impact on their at-home learning. So if you think about, we talked a little bit about it broadens their thinking. It allows them to see things from a different perspective. There has been a lot of problem solving that has had to happen in my house because they are experiencing new things for the first time, sometimes with limited direction. So they are increasing their ability to problem solve. It increases their level of creativity, and really broadens their perceptions on how they view different things related to learning. And really, I think many of our kids have learned how relationships are different with the pandemic and how connecting with people looks differently. And so the list above gives us many reasons to understand the importance of emotional intelligence and how we as parents can encourage positive emotions related to their personal growth and their academic success. And I really think that's the key piece here, that when we're talking about social emotional learning at home, that we're looking at both their personal growth, their ability to grow. I love that idea of grit and resilience, to keep persisting in the face of things when they're hard, and really when they're doing that they are in fact making a positive difference on their academic success. And so those two things are carefully intertwined, and they really do have an impact on each other. Next slide. So there are many ways that you can elicit emotion in learning ways when you're at home with your child. And these are just some ideas, so you can take a look at them. These come from Dr. Spencer Kagan, and he talks about these are ways that teachers can elicit emotions from children in the classroom. And I think that these same things can be carried over for parents into at-home learning. You know, there are very simple things. Listen to some music and write a journal. Maybe spend some time cooking together and talking with each other. You know, give each other a challenge and see if you can meet it. Heidi and I were talking at the very beginning. Sometimes you just have to laugh about things and just kind of release some stress through laughter and sharing some time together. The idea of visuals, you know, do they have a dedicated space at home? Do they have the visuals and the clues and the things that they need to help them? I think that's great. And I think just sometimes finding some time to just be together, play a game, visit with each other, communicate, help them get off the screen and really have to interact verbally. And really one of the greatest ways that I think that you can do this is something that we do at our house, and that is every night, no matter how many people are home, we sit around the table and we share our highs and our lows. And this is really an opportunity to foster some communication with your child about what was great about today. Can you tell me what the highest point of your day was and why it was? And then we talk about what wasn't so great. You know, what are some things that didn't go the right way today? What are some ways that we can maybe manage that or approach that differently in the future? And we do that on a daily basis just because so many things are different. So that's my check-in, to be able to say, hey, you know, what was great today? And help them to start to recognize those things themselves so that they can self-regulate and be more self-aware. And those are just some ways that you can do that at home when you're trying to pull out those different kinds of positive emotions from your kids. Next slide.
So we're probably not traveling right now. So this lady probably looks foreign to most of us. But you got to put my message in the next few slides is for parents to take care of themselves too, right? To put your own oxygen mask on first. Your self-care is so important in order for you to take care of others. And your children see this. They can sense when you're feeling peaceful. They can sense when you're a bit frustrated. They watch your actions, you know, and it's okay. After you put your own mask on first, it's okay to say that I'm tired. It's okay to say that tomorrow is going to be better than it was today. Today wasn't our best day. But again, your children need to see that you're resilient and that you have those coping skills, but you have to put your mask on first in order to take care of others. So next slide. So what can you do? So my dissertation way back in the day was on job balance. And what I found even at that time was the importance of diet, exercise, sleep, and having your own support system. So taking care of you you're an essential worker. It's essential. Next piece on the slide talks about that quiet time. And everybody's thinking, yeah, what does that really mean? You know, I was never able to find more than 24 hours in a day. So finding that 15 minutes, whether that's taking a walk, whether that's reading a book, whether that's doing a type of meditation, whether that's working on your reflection journal, if that's your own quiet bath time, but you need to take and find that piece of time for you to help you rejuvenate. I'm all about the healthy choices. I'm all about the diet, exercise, and nutrition that might be restricting, you know, alcohol use and you know, other types of medications, you know, that can help you improve your own mental health. Make sure you set realistic goals for both you and your child. You know, that might be, you know what, you get one argument today with your brother, so choose wisely. That might be, here's your argument coupon for mom and dad today. You get to use one, that's it. It might be a good place to have your children do journals if they do some journal writing. You can write your joy for today and your frustration for today. And then it's kind of interesting to look back on that and see what your joys were. What did that joy journal say about, what happened a month ago as opposed to today? Boundaries are your friend too. It's okay to say no. It's okay to say that we made a mistake. It's okay, because we are going to learn something different tomorrow, and also to know our limits. Last piece on this slide is, what does it take for you to refill your passion bucket? Something that you haven't done in the past. What can you do different now? As for me, it's sewing or knitting or sketching, but it might be for you trying something new. It could be learning Sudoku. Those silly old crossword puzzles could come back. Maybe it's putting the puzzle together as a family that maybe you got for Christmas. Maybe it's trying a new recipe. Maybe it's that once a month fancy, everybody dresses up and we have fancy dinner at home time. But doing something, trying those new recipes, something for you that rekindles in you something to fill your passion bucket and to make you feel good. Next slide. Again, some of these, are for you as a parent. Taking care of yourself goes back to the nutrition, sleep, and exercise. The routines, some people like to have those written routines. You might have that whiteboard that shows the weekly schedule, shows your children's schedule and shows your schedule. Make sure you schedule those brain breaks in there, those times to get up and move and to get away from the screen. Make sure that you have that time when you're just present for your own child. Be real mindful of that. When is that one-on-one time that you have? Nicole does it as a family at dinner. Is there a certain time of the day that you want to schedule that 15-minute block that you're just walking with your own child or just talking with each of your children? Some parents have told me that they have color cards. And when the parent is working at home and in an important meeting and there's a red card on the door, okay, you don't interrupt mom now. You handle it and deal with it. We'll talk about it later. But having some kind of a system of communication when you have to be at certain meetings and can't be interrupted. And again, I have on here making sure that you do model the behavior and you're a good listener. Again, 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And again, note that your children are always watching. Positive comments, Nicole talked about positive emotions, making sure you're asking your children questions to help them think for themselves. How might you do that? Or, what could you do different? Or what do you think about? Making sure that we're giving them not just positive comments, but helping them think at the same time. Service learning looks a bit different right now, but what can we do different during this pandemic time? Could it be we could think about making some homemade cards to send to a veterans home? Might it be that there might be handwritten messages that we could send to a local care center, assisted living center, if it's allowable? Even just positive signs in your front window. Last year, I know lots of people did different colored hearts. But maybe it's a positive word every week, and people, when they walk around the block, look at your front window to see what the word of the week is. Something like that for your neighborhood. You might want to check with law enforcement and first responders to see if they would accept a thank you banner, or, I don't know if treats would be acceptable, but something so that your children know to reach out to people that are working right now to somehow pay some kind of kindness forward. And creativity, that comes into play, especially when we're seeing each other 24/7 and can't really get away from each other, and what does that mean? Is Tuesday night takeout night and we rotate who gets to decide what food we're going to go for tonight? Is Thursday night TV night that we're going to, so-and-so gets to choose the 30-minute show for tonight? Everything looks different, of course, depending upon your children's ages and bedtime. But again, just trying to throw something a little different into the mix so that children look forward to certain nights of the week to try to break that week up. And then always, continue, if your children are still learning online, to take advantage of any support services. And this can be besides your child's teacher at school and other professionals they work with at school, maybe friends at your church, or, you know, through some kind of, you know, one of your mental health or medical providers. Next slide. So some students have gone back to school. Some are going back to school in third quarter. So what do those transitions look like before we go back to our brick and mortar school? Your children are probably experiencing a lot of different feelings if they're in the process of doing that. There could be a lot of excitement and happiness to see people again, and there could be some angst and some worry attached to that too. So if there is a transition coming for your child, what does that look like? Talk about that, you know, talk about math, talk about what that wingspan between friends looks like. Obviously, washing your hands may look different. They may be eating lunch in the classroom. Playground may be different. They may be going in a different door at school. I'm sure your child's schools will have some of those sessions set up to talk about what that looks like, but also for you to listen as a parent to hear what those emotions are going to be like, both those positive and negative emotions, and then problem solve situations. Well, what happens if somebody doesn't have their mask on? Or, you know, what happens if I need to go to the rest, you know, just a lot of different questions to talk through. And it might be your answer as a parent is, I don't know. You know, we're going to have to ask your teacher and see. Also, if your child is looking at reentry, you want to still have some activities at home that remain the same. And maybe you had a chore chart in the past. You know, what chores are still going to get done every day or every week? What does that look like? What does, you know, your own communication with the teacher look like, and your own questions and fears? You want it to be a safe environment for your children to go back to, you know, and so does your teachers. You know, what does that look like with you in yourself as far as talking to your child about how you're feeling? Make sure that you reassure your child that they're going to be safe, that there's going to be some great days where they're going to be learning. It's going to look different. There could be some plexiglass stations. You know, the desk could be spaced differently. But what a great time for your child to be able to go back and be among some friends if they can go back to school to continue to learn. Next slide.
So just kind of continuing with some of the suggestions that Heidi gave, you know, really talking to your students about some of the rules that they're going to maybe need to follow, and really just, again, helping them to really conceptualize what the differences might look like. For example, you're going to have your mask on your face, so trying to, you know, to avoid touching your nose and your mouth, those things that we're teaching them, you know, when we go to the grocery store, just kind of reminding them of those things that will help to keep them safe. A key thing here is to reestablish the connection that you have with their teacher. I know here in our area, they were in school for a couple months, then they've been remote for a couple months, and now they're going back. So, you know, parents had a connection and then it changed a little bit. And so to reestablish that, if your children have been remote learning all year long and you've just been connecting, you know, via email and during the Zoom calls, just, you know, really find some time to maybe sit down and write an email and let them know kind of maybe what some of your worries and fears are, how your child is feeling about coming back, and just sharing some information about your child's progress and how they've been handling at-home learning, and really what some of your hopes and your desires and your wishes are, you know, moving forward for the remainder of the school year. Really practicing some of the skills that they're going to have to use when they go to school will help them to ease some of that uncertainty that they have. You know, have them wear their masks for 30 to 45 minutes at a time so that they can see what it feels like to have it on for longer periods of time. You know, have them practice talking with a mask on. They may have to talk a little bit louder if they're in a classroom of children and everybody has their masks on so that their teacher can hear. Really just make part of that daily routine talking about what, you know, it's going to look like in the coming days and weeks, depending on what your individual situation is with re-entry back to school. And again, it's really important to stay connected online still through, grading platforms and building, the district website, because I know that they're updating those pretty regularly with, things that are changing and happening at school. But just really stay connected the best that you can. I know many schools aren't allowing, parents and things to come in this year. And so you have to be very intentional about getting the information and then relaying that back to your child, because this is a time where authentic, transparent communication about what's happening every step of the way will help your child re-enter with much more confidence and greater ease, and really just greater peace of mind. Next slide.
Those are just some of the references that we had for this session. And that concludes our session. And I think we start the Q&A now.
Great. Thank you both for the great presentation. And we do have a few questions. And quick reminder, if you have a question, just find the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Scroll down about halfway and then enter the question there. And yeah, given the subject matter of tonight and the situation we're talking about, given that this is a community trident community, if you have any stories or suggestions that have worked for you in these situations, please share. And we'd be happy to share with everyone in the community so we can work together to solve and mitigate some of these issues. And first question we have, I'm directing this one to Dr. Frederick. Can you provide some examples on how to get children to move from negative emotions to positive ones?
Yeah, so I think probably the key thing to realize here is that some of those things are parenting things that we do on a daily basis, right? We have them stop and count to 3. We, take a time out. We, what works really well for my kids is we walk shoulder to shoulder because they just feel like they can communicate better with me that way. A strategy that I used as a principal that really works in my own home is we talked a lot about the stoplight, and that, red means stop, yellow lets us know like, hey, the stop is coming, green means go. And so we have to recognize when we're getting to that yellow light ourselves, so that when we start to hit that yellow light, it becomes, now I have to have a strategy. And usually the strategy for us is just to, take a step away. And then really, once that break has happened, that 3 seconds, sometimes they need a minute, sometimes they need 10 minutes. But we always come back and we identify, what is it that you were feeling? And why were you feeling that? Because the why is always important. So many times we focus on the what. What is happening? What is happening? What is happening? But when we can get to the why of the negative emotion, it's much easier to determine and to help them counteract that with a positive emotion, or a different strategy for approaching how they were feeling about that. But for me, I think the greatest strategy is to figure out why. What is it? Identify it. And then why are you feeling that way? And really help them communicate. And we have to do that in many different ways, because not a lot of children, can communicate exactly why. So we'd use strategies like, can you draw me a picture? Can you go show me with your Legos, what's going on? And we use lots of creative strategies for getting them to be able to first identify the negative emotion. And then I have to model and lead in my house often with, this is how you can counteract that with a positive emotion. So if you're feeling this, can you think about it this way? And it requires a lot of leadership from my part as the parent to help them to see that. And those are just some strategies that we use here in the home that have worked to help them go from negative to positive. Does it always work? No. And that's just the truth. It doesn't. But we try and we talk about it. And you know what? Next week we may have the same issue, and we're going to talk about it, because consistency, fidelity with, working through these skills is so important, because every opportunity, every experience is different. It just gives you another option to have a conversation.
Great, thank you. And next question, this one's for you, Dr. Schmidt. have you found that have you found that proactively organizing with parental cohorts is an effective strategy? I think it's similar to the other question we got about building bubbles with other families.
I'm not sure I'm understanding the question, Danny.
Have you found that families that organize with other parents and other children to build bubbles, have you found that to be an effective strategy?
I think that it works for certain people, and I wish that we had the one size fits all. I do know with my colleagues in Wisconsin and Illinois, those that have worked within their neighborhood bubbles, allowing their children to get together and kind of having talked through that as adults about our kids need this social interaction. In the summer, it was obviously easier because you could do backyard, get-togethers and whatnot. Winter is a bit more challenging, but and sledding and different outdoor events. So I think it works definitely if the situation is appropriate for certain families. Certain families don't have that option or that opportunity. It really depends on their situation. Some it's economically driven, with parents having to work a different shift now, or parents having to take on 2 jobs. It's just been very, very difficult. And some students have been left to learn online, with probably a little less supervision than they should. So there's definitely, I think, bookends as far as what parents have been able to provide, just because of everybody's home situation, being and looking so different now.
Great, thank you. And next question, this wasn't directed to anyone, so I'll send it to both of you, starting with Dr. Frederick. And question is that I have a child with anxiety issues, and there's been a lot of starting and stopping of in-person schooling, and I feel that it is negatively affecting their emotional growth. What recommendations do you have for me to mitigate that?
Well, I think one of the strategies that Heidi talked about, reaching out to your support systems, really reaching out to if there's a school counselor, if there is, the doctor, just having some help there too. I think that's always a really important strategy when you have a child that has anxiety. I have a child that has anxiety as well, so I understand that. And I think the biggest thing I do for my child is try to anticipate the best that I can what may be coming and share those things with her. I have to be very cautious about how and what you communicate, especially when they struggle with anxiety, because you don't want to add to that. But I have found that when I as the adult can anticipate things happening, and usually as a parent, I know ahead of time, hey, we're going back to remote learning, or, hey, we need to, change up a little bit here. I have to present that to her in a way that she can understand. And I share an appropriate amount of information so that she can be certain on what is happening without oversharing too much that might add to, her stress and anxiety about the situation. But I think reaching out to, hopefully your school has, some help there as well, and some resources, and I would be really honest with the teacher. I do that a lot. I send emails like, hey, my child struggles a little bit with anxiety. And so, this is how you can support us. And this is, what we need. And this is what we can offer you. And we really have that open communication with the teacher. I'm very transparent with with her teachers every single year, actually, because they need to understand her so that they can appropriately address, her needs in learning as well. And so I would encourage you to reach out to the teacher for sure and make sure that they're aware as well.
Yeah, and I would just add, besides what Nicole has said with the support services and knowing your child, is really trying to get out in front of when those starts and stops are, and then going back to providing that steady routine. So if we're in a pivot and we're in a 2-week pivot, what does that look like at home? Okay, this is our routine. This is what it looks like at home. So even though there's starts and stops, there's still some kind of routine built in those starts and stops, especially when it's at home. And I know that school districts have implemented some different strategies and help for students, understanding that many are going through some kind of anxiety and mental health issues right now. So always, with the counselor, maybe your school has a school psychologist or a social worker, all different levels of support services that could be helpful to you as a parent or that your child can get to know. But making sure that when your child goes back, there's always that trusted adult for them in the building. Who is it that they can go to? I know if there's been stops and starts there, that may not have had time to develop some of those relationships, but who can that your child go to as that trusted adult to help them, with their anxiety when they're in brick and mortar, and obviously then we have the whole set of peer interactions and, things that happen once we're back face to face. But, it does take the village though. It does take reaching out, asking for help but again, trying to follow those routines so that your children see that stability too.
And just one more thing, because I know so many kids are experiencing this right now. One thing I know with my child is anxiety tends to be a movie in her head. And so I ask her often, tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what you're feeling. Because as long as she can just get it out and say, Mom, I'm really worried about being behind in this when we go back into the classroom. And just that little bit of being able to verbalize exactly what she's feeling, and then we can talk through it, has been really helpful for her. So I always tell her, like, if something is bothering you, if you're feeling anxious about something, and that goes back to, even if it's not me, if it's a trusted adult, a teacher, a grandparent, you have to tell somebody what it is that you're feeling, and we can help you walk through the different things, and we can help you see it a little bit differently. And I think that's key too, to help them start to talk about it and to normalize that it's okay you're feeling worried. It's okay that you're a little bit stressed about this or you're feeling anxious. So many people are. It's okay. So let's talk about it. I think that's just huge.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Frederick, let's stick with you for this next question. How do you explain the COVID-19 pandemic to students, as well as the new classroom protocols?
That's a good question, because I think probably every district is going to do it a little bit different, and they'll have different expectations. I think that having been in administration, I probably would coach my teachers on how we would be doing that uniformly in the classroom, and how we would be talking about it, uniformly. I don't have a great answer for that, I'll be honest, because I don't know exactly. I'm not in the K-12 classroom right now, so I don't know how the teachers are explaining, if they're talking about it, in pandemic terms, or if they're talking about it in medical terms. But I feel like it should be uniform across the board. And I feel like it has to be a developmentally appropriate explanation, something that they can understand, so that you're not creating more fear. I know that there are so many resources on the CDC that, show if you have, younger children, you can explain it this way. If you have middle-aged children, you can explain it that way. So I would encourage you to seek out some of those professional resources that give strategies for how to explain it appropriately. And then I think, from my experience talking to some of my colleagues here in the area, they are explaining the changes in protocol, the different looks of the classroom, having to stay together, not being able to play with their friends at recess, really as just a health and safety measure, right? That they're trying to keep the kids healthy, they're trying to keep them safe, and this is what, they know is going to, help to do that. And again, I believe in, answering their questions and being transparent and explaining as much as you can at a developmentally appropriate level. And like I said, I think there's resources that can help teachers and parents really to do that effectively.
This is my funny story about that with my 5K grandson. He goes to a school called Harrison, and they're the Harrison Hawks. So when he told me about the wingspan difference, I didn't get it at first, but then it was, Grandma, we have to have a wingspan between me and my friends. And so just even those little simple, wingspans, and we wear a mask because of the germs. We don't want to give other people germs. It's so age dependent. But I think that teachers have doing a great job in explaining those things, so there's not extra fear. And, I guess, we just got to give our teachers kudos for pivoting to online, and then now going back to face-to-face, and just the extra time and effort. I am a pen pal to a 3rd grade class in Wisconsin. And the other day, the students did Reader's Theater to me. And to watch that teacher manage those behaviors with the masks on, and she's, oops, just wait a minute. And she pulled over the Zoom cart, and she had 3 students learning via Zoom, because that district gave choice. So she had to face-to-face, and then she had to turn around and work with her Zoom students too. I just give kudos to teachers for the work that they're doing to meet the needs of everybody, to keep everybody safe, depending upon their district and preferences.
And I think if you're a parent and you have a specific desire for how you are communicated to your children, I think when we talk about reconnecting with the teacher or connecting with the teacher, and that's important to share, because the teachers, they don't, they do their best to be uniform, to, be grade and age level appropriate. But if you have a specific desire, communicating that to your teacher early before, the interaction happens would be, I think, appropriate as well. Just letting them know, hey, this is how we're talking about it in our house. And, just sharing that so that they have an understanding of that as well.
Great, thank you. And just by the way, Dr. Frederick, a couple people asked for links to some of the resources you mentioned.
Okay.
So and those are things we can provide to you afterwards, and we'll just send them around to everyone. And just to cap things off with one more question this evening, can you talk a bit about the webinar we'll be having in 2 weeks, which is sort of the other side of the coin to this, and how it's going to differ and build on the content from this webinar? And we'll start with you, Dr. Schmidt.
Sure. The webinar we're doing in 2 weeks, really, this webinar we kind of designed for parents. Our next webinar is going to be more for educators that are working during the pandemic. We want to talk about emotional intelligence. We'll touch a little bit about social emotional learning. We will get into a bit of mindfulness along with some self-care for that, but our focus is going to be really for educators as opposed to parents. But we would invite anybody to come and sit along with us here in a couple weeks. We'd love to have you come back.
And Dr. Frederick, anything to add to that?
No, and again, like Heidi said, parents, if you want to join us, just to see a little bit about what teachers are learning and thinking and understanding about social emotional learning in the classroom, please feel free to do so.
Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation, and thank you everyone for attending tonight. The link to the webinar we mentioned, that's in 2 weeks on February 18th. If you look at the chat box, we just posted a link there, and you can sign up there, and we'll send you various information leading up to that date. And on your screen now, the core webpage, we can learn more about the series and access some of our doctoral and educational resources. I want to give a special thanks again to our 2 presenters tonight, Dr. Heidi Schmidt, Dr. Nicole Frederick. Thank you all who attended for your participation, interest, and great questions. And if you'd like to reach out to either professor, their contact information is on the screen now. Good night and have a great day. Thanks so much.